Morning chaos. Have you ever experienced it? It's one of the most common questions I get from parents, seeking help to get their mornings to be less chaotic. They're exhausted from exercising sheer willpower over impossible odds. I've been planning this video for a while, and ironically, this morning, I experienced some morning chaos myself. I will tell you more about that story once we jump into the details. Okay, let's set the scene. Your child is dragging all morning. You're pushing them to brush their teeth, eat their breakfast, put on their clothes. It's just about time to leave, and we're at socks. And you tell your child, okay, let's put on the socks. And your child is deeply invested in organizing their Pokemon cards. You're trying to hold it together, but your voice is rising to that mom is about to lose it octave. We finally get on the first sock, and then, oh, these socks feel weird. I can't wear these socks. You get another pair of socks. Maybe you're in danger of missing the bus. You get the whole picture. Mornings can feel like a total disaster. But here's the thing. Getting out the door feels like one giant task, but it's actually a series of tiny ones. And if we don't figure out where the real breakdown is happening, we'll keep fighting the same battle every single day. So today, we're going to talk about successfully tackling the morning. As I mentioned, we tend to think of getting out the door as one single thing, but in reality, it's more like a 12-step obstacle course filled with booby traps along the way. And it's important to identify each of those breakdown points, and even with more specificity, where the difficulty is within each separate task, so that we can solve for that difficulty. So let's start with some of the common points of breakdown. First, getting up and getting out of bed. Second, getting dressed, eating breakfast. That's third. Fourth might be ending a little bit of playtime that we allow our children to have in the morning. Fifth, brushing teeth and brushing hair. Sixth, putting on shoes and a jacket. These are all places where our children might have a problem, might have difficulty, and our response sometimes is just like, we have to get going because we feel the urgency. But we have to look into each breakdown point with a little more detail into why things are going wrong so that we can address each why separately. And in general, we're going to have to address just one or two issues at a time, because if we try to address them all, it all then feels too overwhelming for both parent and child. So you might be thinking, oh, that sounds so long and drawn out and it sounds like so much work. But you know, it's a really long process. Trying the same thing every day, having different things go wrong every morning. It's like a whack-a-mole game. That is a really long, drawn-out process. And know this, once you solve each separate challenge, it doesn't mean it'll never arise again. It will arise less frequently, and when it does, you'll know exactly what to do because you focused on what was at the core of each problem. While pursuing the one success at a time approach, I want you to think about the overarching theme as, how do I work with my child, go with my child, instead of fighting against him? That brings us to this morning's fun, which I mentioned earlier. My son woke up and decided there was no school today. And as a result, he was not going to eat his breakfast. He was not going to get dressed. He was not going to do any of the things. And my initial impulse was like, of course there's school. Let's do it and be firm. But I realized I had to leave space for him to process that there was no school. So I said to him, well, that's interesting. I wonder if you think that because there was no school last week. But I also said, why don't we do this? We can get dressed. We can eat breakfast, get in the car, and we'll drive over there. And if there's no school, what fun thing could we do? And let's talk about that over breakfast, right? We talked about all the things that we could do that would be fun today other than going to school. And it enabled him to cooperate with getting ready and getting out the door, because either way, I was setting up the scenario so that either way we had to get out the door. So it was a way of going with him. I wasn't telling him he was wrong for thinking there was no school. I didn't have to be firm or aggressive. I was just saying, that's interesting. Let's think of how we can work together to get this job done. So in addition to the overarching theme of working with your child, you want to identify where is the breakdown, and that requires a little detective work. Is it getting up and getting out of bed? Is it putting on clothes? Is it choosing clothes? Because there are solutions for each of these things. If it's getting out of bed, how can you make that easier? You know, for one mom, she talked about it was so cold right now that it was hard. Great. Can you put a space heater in there and turn it on 5 minutes before they need to get out of bed, right? If it's, eating breakfast, can you have a breakfast that they could eat a few bites and take it on the road? If it's clothing, can you identify clothing that is easier for them to put on and sometimes just by multiples of that to make mornings easier. Right? If it's getting going, I had one mom who did a dance party with her 3 kids. They did a 5-minute dance party to Don't Stop Me Now from Queen. Look it up. It's a great song. And it just got everybody going, which enabled them to move a little faster in the morning. Once you find where those breakdowns happen, commit to trying to address one at a time, or sometimes you can handle 2, but figure out what's the biggest one and can you address that? So for example, one mom, her son had a hard time getting out of the car to go into school. And she used to try to force him, which then caused a meltdown, and both escalated, mom and son. And it became a thing every morning. So she decided, you know what, I'm just going to allow the time, allow him to collect himself. We may be 2 or 3 minutes late, but in the end, they were able to get into school. In the beginning, they were a little late, but over time, he realized that he didn't have to have that conflict in the morning. And now he easily gets out of the car most mornings. Sometimes he still needs a little encouragement, but either way, she's decided, I'm not going to fight with this. I'm going to allow space for him to collect himself before he goes into school. What she also learned with that approach was that it made the morning go quicker because actually the conflict eats up a lot of time. So by staying calm herself, self-regulating, and allowing the space for him to take the time he needed to regulate before going into school, made everything go more quickly. Once she tackled that issue of getting into school, she was able to then move on to other issues in the morning that could have been smoother, like helping him wear appropriate clothing for the season, right? He didn't love wearing sweaters or long sleeves. So she had to just allow it because you can't fight over each issue. And most of the issues require some creativity on our part. Some children, it's hard to get them to wear shoes. So can you allow them to wear slippers in the car and put shoes on at the end? They're just ways of coming up with creative solutions once you identify the specific areas of challenge. All of the solutions stand on a platform of parental self-regulation. We can't help our children regulate if we're not regulated. So that is something that we really have to focus on first. That really is the first order of business. If you're stressed and rushed and at your limit, they feel it, and then they dig in harder. What I've learned personally and with countless families is that the most effective tool is for the parent to commit to re-regulating if they get activated. Deep breath, quick reset, because the best morning hack of all isn't a timer or a checklist, it's a calm parent. It's also so helpful to step back and think about, are there places where we can make a change instead of trying to force our children to do something differently? So for example, can we get up 10 minutes earlier just to create more space in the day? Can we pack lunches the night before? Can we lay out the clothing? These things are hard, yep, especially getting up earlier. We're all exhausted, I get it, but sometimes we have to choose our hard. For me, one of the important things I had to do was to change my rigidity about always being on time. Not only was my determination not working, it was backfiring. So part of the work was for me getting comfortable with the idea that I might be late sometimes despite my best efforts. Resolving that perspective enabled me to show up with less stress, less intensity, and more calm, and actually, which then enabled me to be on time more often. And look, you will get stressed sometimes and triggered because you're human, and that's okay too. Even with the best plans, some mornings will be hard. And when that happens, you know what to do. Stay calm, because your energy will set the tone. Pause and adjust. If something isn't working, step back and reframe. And remember, we're looking for progress, not perfection. Perfection would be nice, but progress is the realistic path. Mornings don't have to feel like a battle. When we stop expecting our children to magically move faster and we start breaking things down step by step, everything changes. I would love to hear in the comments what part of the morning is hardest for you, and have you found any tricks or tips that would help other parents get their mornings going more smoothly. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, I hope you give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.